Hello, this is Dr. Adam J. Bach. In this brief audio presentation, we're going to talk about opportunities. You might be asking yourself, why isn't this a master class? Why doesn't Dr. Bach just tell us how to build a successful technology venture? Surely that would be simpler than all these topics and technicalities. And the reason is it's just not that simple. There's too much variation across technologies, industries, and markets. What works in one industry or for commercializing one technology to a specific type of customer may be completely ineffective in another. There are just too many idiosyncratic elements of peoples and teams. I can't predict in advance the kind of co-founders you're going to have. I don't really know what kind of person you are. I don't know how you're going to build a team. And some of the ways that we would approach this would be radically different depending on the kind of people that you have at the organization. And you can see this across different kinds of founders. Steve Jobs is a very different person than Mark Zuckerberg, across a variety of different kinds of organizations and entrepreneurs. You can see that different processes work in some situations and might not work in others. And fundamentally, there's just too much uncertainty and luck. This is one of my favorite quotes about entrepreneurship from Randy Komisar, former CEO of LucasArts. He's been involved in a variety of tech startups, primarily out of California. And he wrote a fantastic book about entrepreneurship called The Monk and the Riddle. You're not really going to learn how to launch a venture there, but you are going to learn about how it could fit in with your life and your career. There are some problems with the book. I'm happy to kind of elaborate on those, but it is a wonderful story and very thoughtful. And it has this spectacular quote in it, which is, if you're brilliant, 15 to 20% of the risk is removed. If you work 24 hours a day, you can get rid of another 15 to 20% of the risk. But the rest of it's going to be completely out of your control. And to me, that is just a fundamental reality of the world of technology entrepreneurship. There's just a lot of things that will be out of your control. If there's a natural disaster or a pandemic or a major economic shift, all of these things will dramatically impact your business, and you fundamentally can't control them. And then there's all these other minor things that could impact you. You could have a co-founder who has a radical change in their life situation, and suddenly everything you've been planning to do is going to look very, very different. And so I would love to give you a simple recipe for the 10 things to do to succeed in technology entrepreneurship, but it would be fundamentally false. And I'm not interested in setting up false expectations about what this process is going to be like. So to start with, we want to understand the nature of opportunities themselves. That's, after all, the basis of entrepreneurship. So the way we approach this is the idea that an opportunity is a set of circumstances. And identifying an opportunity is fundamentally a creative process. I believe that it's a combination of good observation, a certain amount of intuition, and then a willingness to really kind of get your hands dirty in figuring out what's actually going on. And there are some characteristics that we want to incorporate into this. It has to be accomplishable in a reasonable amount of time. There needs to be at least some chance that you can generate the resources that are going to be required to accomplish it. And it has to be at least possible. We usually separate between two types of opportunities, especially in the world of technology entrepreneurship. The first one's called a problem or pull type. The idea is that we find the problem first, and then we look for different possible solutions for it. Specifically trying to find pain points where customers have something that doesn't work. We often do some type of market research and preferably actually talk to people and do direct observation. On the other side, there's what we call a technology push opportunity. And realistically, the vast majority of people who get into technology entrepreneurship come at it from this side. And if you're a scientist, or a researcher, it's very likely you're coming at it from this side as well, which is that you've found some kind of technological innovation. And now what you're hoping to do is to work backwards to identify a customer need. We've developed this incredible molecule. We've come up with this cool engineering solution. And yes, it may have originally been motivated by some type of recognition of a broader problem in society. But the fact that you've now been in the lab or done this innovation work for the past couple of years means, and perhaps have never spoken to actual end users, means that you don't have any direct proof that this thing will actually be viable in a commercial context. And this is because customers don't like to change, even when presented with something that's better. The newer the technology, the bigger the challenge in customer education. And this is something that a lot of academics and practitioners argue about, because clearly some of the great technology entrepreneurship work that's been done has been based on really incredible innovations that didn't have immediately obvious uses. Things like Google's PageRank algorithm, which there was a theory behind it, but it had never been proven that that's how people wanted to search the web. It was an idea based on how papers cite each other. But for every PageRank success story that's out there, there are many, many more failures. And you only have to look at something like the Segway device, the balancing transportation system, to look at something that was an absolutely spectacular technological innovation and a complete failure in the market space. So the textbook encourages you to ask the question, is what you're looking at really an opportunity? And there's a couple of ways to think about this. I'd suggest that first, you have to be sure that it actually creates value for someone, and that can't be your opinion. That's got to be based on what they actually could use it for to create value. The book provides these categories of opportunity, which is kind of a nice checklist for making sure there's some clear mechanism by which the opportunity has the potential to create value. But I would suggest you be cautious with this. I don't think this is truly definitive. I think it's a really helpful way of just kind of double checking for sort of face validity. If your innovation doesn't do any of these things, then you got to really step back and say, wow, is there some kind of value being created here? The answer might be yes, but it just as easily might be no. So this is kind of a good starting point for thinking about it. I want to give you kind of a quick heads up here because the textbook, for better or for worse, kind of uses a lot of different references to talk about one specific thing, which is what we now tend to call the lean startup process. The book refers to it as the express, test, cycle process. It also mentions the act, learn, adjust cycle, but they're really all the same. They're just iterations of the same thing, which is the lean startup, which is what we usually refer to as build, measure, learn. And this is sort of a radical revolution in entrepreneurial thought that came about just about 15 years ago now, maybe a little less, even 12 years, 13 years. Previously, entrepreneurship had always been understood as just a variation of corporate strategy. You did this detailed plan, and then you implemented the plan. And the lean startup theory is that entrepreneurship doesn't work that way because opportunities are not clear. We can't fully know whether they're going to work or not. And so therefore, rather than spend a lot of time planning and developing, what we need to do is to build a prototype, put it in front of customers, find out how they react to it, learn from that, and then develop a new prototype. We're basically iterating. And for those of you who may be in the software side of things, this is probably very familiar because this is actually, it's very much developed out of the whole framework for agile software development. The bottom line is that we are constantly iterating towards a solution. And in the entrepreneurship framework, and from an entrepreneurial mindset perspective, what it really means is that we're willing to be wrong. And this is where a lot of entrepreneurs get tripped up, which is where they think that the whole point of the iteration process is to sort of be incrementally right at each step. But that's just not always the way it works. At any point in this process, when you're identifying customer needs or validating who the customers are, or actually convincing them that there's demand, or building the actual company, at any point in that process, you could hit a stop. You could hit a point where, hey, this assumption was fundamentally wrong. The prototype doesn't present the need, doesn't address the need that we think that our customers actually want addressed, and we've got to start over or go back a couple of steps. So please do try to keep in mind, entrepreneurship, in my opinion, needs a certain amount of humility. Yes, an ego is helpful. You got to believe in yourself because frankly, no one else is going to at the start. But if you start from the perspective that you're always right and that even your customers are wrong, you're really risking high probability of failing. And I want to make a suggestion, which is that the textbook provides some really good ideas about collecting customer information and doing the kinds of data analysis that's required in the build, measure, learn process. But there's a wonderful tool from Maurya, who generated this framework called the Lean Stack, which presents some really nice scripts for interviewing, talking to customers. So if you are the sort of person who knows you probably need to reach out to end users or customers, but it's something that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, this resource can be fantastic because it's literally almost like scripted conversations to help you walk through the process, depending on whether you're going after problem identification or whether you think you have a solution and you want to try to put it in front of people to see what they say. So for those of you for whom this is not a very familiar process, I strongly encourage you, it's not part of the course, but it's a fantastic resource that you may want to take a look at. The goal here is to distinguish between our vision, which is sort of this grand framework for what we think we could do for customers, a minimum viable product, which is really something that we could use to get in front of customers that they might pay for, and then iterating to figure out what's actually going to sell in the long haul. And this is my favorite graphical version of that, which is we all start with this sort of vision of all these spectacular colored donuts with different textures and ingredients and so on. And the reality is that if we try to build all of that right at the beginning, the odds are good we're not going to satisfy anyone, because most of this is based on what we think rather than what customers actually need. And so a much better point is to start with something that's pretty sure to get some good feedback from customers. We may not like the feedback, right? I mean, we might put this particular glazed donut in front of customers who say, yeah, I guess that's okay, but I wouldn't buy it unless it had sprinkles, or I won't buy it unless it has chocolate, or I won't buy it unless it has a filling. That's really important information to know, but think about how much more valuable that will be now than if you've actually built out the entire vision, right? Because if you've built out the entire vision, you're probably going to have to go back and start from scratch, and you've spent a lot of money and probably a lot of time. And so this is kind of a really nice way of getting to what's actually going to be commercially viable. It's useful then, in the context of technology entrepreneurship, to think about different types of innovation, because generating a new donut's not actually that impressive. We're usually talking about other kinds of innovations here. And the book provides a fairly nice framework for thinking about this, which is looking at the basic design concepts associated with the innovation and whether we are reinforcing the existing design concepts for technologies in the market or whether we're overturning them. One way of thinking about that would be the difference between, say, a much more efficient internal combustion engine and switching over entirely to an electric battery-based vehicle design. And then on the second axis, linkages between modules, that is, the elements of the innovation that we're coming up with and how they interact with other aspects of the design. So whether those are unchanged or whether even those are no longer going to be the same. And that could be something a little bit more along the line of how transportation services fit together. So for example, if we were to present electric cars for a taxi service, there the linkages between the modules are the same, right? We still need a dispatcher, we still need drivers, we still need some kind of system to allocate where people go. But if we're going to abandon owning the cars entirely and we're going to use a peer-to-peer based system in which the drivers don't even work for the company, something like Uber, now we've dramatically changed the linkages between the modules. And so this then gives you a sense of just how radical the change that your innovation will bring to the market or the industry. Well, why do we want to know that? Who cares, right? Well, the reason we care is because this is likely to help prepare the team in the venture for how risky and rewarding the business might be. We expect that high risk opportunities have to generate higher rewards. It might give us a good sense of the investment requirements and how challenging customer education is going to be. It also will give us a sense of potential channel and partner conflicts. Is this such a wonderful idea, but it's going to anger potential other participants in the industry that we might want to rely on? And then finally, challenging investors. If this is a really radical innovation and it's going to change how things work, our investors, potential investors, may not be familiar with what we're trying to do either. The book then identifies characteristics of an attractive opportunity, and I think that these are, a useful starting point, that it should be timely and solvable, relatively important, presumably profitable in some way, shape, or form, and that there's a favorable context. This is a little different in terms of how we think about attractive opportunities than most frameworks. The most traditional framework for thinking about evaluating opportunities comes from the New Business Road Test, which is your other reading. And I'd encourage you to understand the textbook's perspective on it, but also to really think carefully and review how the New Business Road Test approaches it, because the New Business Road Test is a much more standardized framework that a lot more business people will be familiar with, even if they've never heard it called this before. But the idea is that what we're looking at are four critical things, generally speaking: how attractive is the market, how attractive is the industry, that means how profitable is the industry, whether we can generate a sustainable advantage, and whether there are specific target segments that are attractive and have benefits. The central stuff on mission, execution, connectedness in the value chain are all team-related issues, and they're not actually specific to the opportunity itself. You can think of the opportunity as sort of being the outside of the diagram, and then how good your team is the inside of the diagram. So just some quick concluding thoughts about opportunities. It's really important to remember that opportunities have an inherent level of attractiveness distinct from implementation issues. That is, an attractive is opportunity regardless of an opportunity is attractive regardless of the team going after it. The question is whether the team can effectively implement it or not, right? You could have a great team go after an attractive opportunity and be successful. You could have a really bad team go after an attractive opportunity and be unsuccessful. They're separate. Opportunities don't implement themselves, right? This is the critical role of the entrepreneur in a socioeconomic system. Without entrepreneurs, these opportunities simply never come to life. An opportunity shouldn't be limited to profit generation, right? I mean, the textbook and technology entrepreneurship in general are often primarily focused on an opportunity being attractive when there's a profitable outcome. But I'd encourage you to think more broadly than that, and especially if you have an interest in social entrepreneurship and some of the bigger challenges that our society faces. What makes an opportunity attractive, in my opinion, is whether there's the real potential to generate lasting change. And whether that change is profitability or whether that change is improving the environment or any other number of social issues, I'd encourage you to try to keep a broader view in mind. And then entrepreneurs can either sort of observe an opportunity or they might create an opportunity. And this is a wonderful argument that professors and academics and researchers love to have, but quite frankly, it's good to know about, but not so important to worry about. Your textbook does kind of delve into it a little bit. It focuses on sort of the creation side of things. And I tend to think there's a happy medium there somewhere, that some opportunities are primarily observed, some opportunities are created truly, and some are probably a mix in between. So I hope this gives you a good starting point for thinking about opportunities and all of the other factors that are associated with technology entrepreneurship.